They pointed at you and laughed. Oh, they laughed loud, didn't they? Like thunder that had no rain behind it. They chuckled when you stumbled, when you tried, when you dared to dream past the little box they crammed you into. Their smirks were knives, and their laughter was a noose. Every time you spoke, they rolled their eyes. Every step you took forward, they whispered that it was clumsy, foolish, doomed. You became entertainment to them, a character in their ugly little play. The fool who thought they could matter. You remember the way they watched you, don't you? Like a glass bird trying to fly. Fragile, laughable, destined to shatter before their very eyes. And maybe part of you laughed too. A desperate laugh that crawled out from the ruins inside you, trying to beat them to the punch. If you made the joke first, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much, maybe. But it did hurt. It hollowed you. Their laughter was not just in the air. It sank into your skin. It clawed into your bones. You carried their ridicule like a second skeleton inside you, brittle and screaming. They pointed at you like you were small, like you were some trembling little thing that could be flicked off the edge of the world. And for a long time, maybe you believed them. You were heir to them, weightless, forgettable. A ghost made of empty hopes and broken plans. They saw through you, like you weren't even stitched to the world properly. You floated through their lives like an afterthought, like background noise, like a shadow that no one bothers to chase. You could have screamed in their faces, and they still would have shrugged. You were invisible, a whisper in a storm, a song they never bothered to learn the words to. You held your dreams in your hands, trembling and bright, but to them it was nothing, less than nothing. You were the flicker before the light, the exhale before the voice, the almost that never becomes anything real. And the worst part? You started treating yourself the same way. You apologized for existing. You shrank. You dimmed your own flame, because you thought, maybe, just maybe, if you took up less space, the weight of their contempt would hurt less. It didn't. It never does. You walked into rooms and felt the air shift, not because you mattered, but because you didn't. You sat at tables and were treated like a piece of the furniture, something to be ignored, something to be endured. They spoke over you. They looked through you. They measured you in fractions, in failures, in forgettable moments. And every time they dismissed you, it carved another hollow inside your chest. You became lighter, emptier, thinner, not in body, but in spirit. They saw you as nothing, because that was easier than seeing you as a threat. They took you lightly because the thought of your gravity terrified them. You screamed silently. You screamed until your throat bled, but no one heard. You built bonfires out of your pain and waved your arms to the sky, but no one looked. Your heart thundered against your ribs like a war drum, but they didn't even glance your way. There's a unique kind of hell that comes from being invisible. A hell where the fire burns hotter because it's never seen. You tried everything, didn't you? You worked harder, you loved louder. You gave pieces of yourself away in handfuls, hoping someone would notice the empty spaces you left behind. But the world just kept spinning, indifferent, cold, blind. You tried to outrun the silence, filling your calendar with noise, your lungs with forced laughter, your life with hollow victories. But it followed you everywhere, the aching absence of being noticed, of being valued, of being enough. At night, when the distractions fell away, you sat with yourself, and the truth of it almost choked you. You mattered to no one. You could disappear tomorrow, and the world would keep laughing, keep eating, keep moving. as if you had never been there at all. And the thing is, you started to feel like maybe you weren't really here at all, like maybe you were already a ghost, haunting a life that never wanted you in the first place. This is how it feels to be taken lightly. It is not a gentle thing. It is not some fleeting sadness you can brush off with a better mood or a stronger coffee. It is a slow erosion. It is a violent forgetting. It is standing in a crowded room and realizing you are more alone than if you had been stranded in the middle of a desert. It is smiling until your face aches just to convince yourself you're still human. It is building dreams out of dust and pretending they feel like castles. It is carrying your own coffin to your own funeral day after day, while the world claps for everyone else. It is hearing them call someone else's name when you spent your whole life writing yours in fire. It is hearing your heartbeat echo against an empty sky and wondering if it even matters. It is swallowing the truth so many times it scars your throat. It is a drowning that no one notices, a suffocation without a hand reaching out. And in that suffocation, you find a terrible kind of clarity. They were never going to save you. They were never going to see you. They were never going to carry you across the finish line. They decided long ago that you weighed nothing, that you deserved nothing, that you were nothing. They took you lightly because it made them feel heavier. They mocked you because they saw a flicker of something in you, and it scared them. So they chose to smother it before it could catch fire. They pointed and laughed because that was easier than admitting they were terrified of what you could become. And maybe, just maybe, the heaviest things in this world start off feeling weightless. There came a time when you started to believe them. Their words weren't just outside you anymore. They leaked in, dripping into your bloodstream, poisoning your mind from the inside out. At first you fought it, didn't you? You tried to stand tall. You told yourself they were wrong, that they didn't know you, that they couldn't define you. But the world has a way of grinding you down, grain by grain, until even the brightest soul looks dull in the mirror. You heard the way they spoke about you when they thought you couldn't hear. You saw the way they looked past you when you stood right in front of them. Every slight, every scoff, every cold shoulder was a stone tossed into the well of your heart. And eventually, the weight was too much. You started to wonder if maybe you were the fool they made you out to be. Maybe you were reaching too high, dreaming too loud, daring too much. Maybe you were exactly what they said you were. Nothing. A ghost chasing shadows. A name no one would ever bother to remember. You tucked your dreams into smaller and smaller corners of yourself, shrinking, apologizing for even having them. You started carrying yourself like an apology. You wore your doubt like a second skin. You laughed softer, spoke less, moved quieter, as if trying to erase your own existence piece by piece. You thought if you made yourself smaller, the pain would shrink too. But it didn't. It grew, fed by your own silence. The nights were the worst. At night, the battles you hid from the world came roaring out of the darkness. You laid in bed, staring at ceilings that stared right back at you, and you fought wars no one ever saw. Wars against your own reflection, against the voice in your head that sounded an awful lot like theirs, against the memories you wished you could unlive. Sleep became a stranger. Dreams became battlegrounds. You would close your eyes and be dragged back to every failure, every humiliation, every moment you wished you could carve out of time and bury deep enough that no one, not even you, could find it. You would lie there with your chest caving in, drowning in a sea of your own doubts. Questions slashed at you like knives. Who do you think you are? What makes you believe you're different? Why should anyone care? The battles left no scars on your skin, but inside, you were bleeding out. The world saw you smile, it saw you nod, it saw you say, "I'm fine." But behind closed doors, you were sinking fast, clawing at the edges of a pit that only you knew was there. You screamed into pillows. You punched walls that didn't fight back. You made bargains with the darkness, promises you barely believed. Just let me get through tonight. Just one more night. And somehow, despite everything, you kept waking up to fight all over again. No medals, no parades, just another night survived. Another invisible victory no one would ever know you won. Dreams crumbled in your hands like old, brittle paper. The things you once held on to with white knuckles. The visions, the plans, the hopes. They slipped through your fingers like ash. You told yourself you were being realistic, that you were just growing up, that it was time to let go. But deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't evolving, you were surrendering, you were letting them win. One by one, you buried your dreams in shallow graves, marking the spot with excuses. It wasn't meant for me. It's too late now. Maybe I wasn't good enough anyway. You became a graveyard for all the things you used to believe in, a cemetery of could-have-beens and almosts. You attended the funerals alone, mourning a life you never even got the chance to live. You tried to fill the void with distractions, with work, with noise, with people who didn't even know your real name. But nothing fit. Nothing filled the aching spaces. Nothing quieted the mourning in your bones. You realized, too late, that dreams don't die clean. They leave behind wreckage. They rot inside you. They haunt you, whispering from the dark corners of your mind, reminding you of everything you could have been. If only you had held on a little longer. The mirror became your greatest enemy. It didn't just reflect your face. It spoke lies in a voice so familiar, you almost didn't recognize it as the enemy. You stood in front of it, day after day, and watched someone you didn't recognize stare back at you. Someone smaller, someone defeated, someone who had swallowed their own fire. The mirror told you you were ugly, unworthy, broken beyond repair. It showed you every flaw, every scar, every crack in the foundation of who you thought you were. And you believed it. You traced the lines under your eyes and called them failures. You counted every pound, every blemish, every mistake, like tally marks carved into prison walls. You became your own warden, your own judge, your own executioner. Every morning was a sentencing, every glance was a conviction, and somewhere deep inside, a small voice, the voice that once dared to dream, cried out. But it was too small to hear over the roar of self-hate. The mirror became a battlefield where you lost over and over again, until finally, you stopped looking, you stopped checking, you stopped caring. You moved through life like a ghost wearing human skin, disconnected from your own reflection. You told yourself it was easier that way. Easier not to hope, easier not to try, easier not to believe, because belief hurt, hope hurt, and you were so tired of hurting. But somewhere, even then, something refused to die. Every birthday forgotten, carved another hollow into your chest. Every celebration missed, every small triumph overlooked, chipped away at something precious inside you. You tried to tell yourself it didn't matter. You tried to shrug it off, laugh it away, bury it beneath 1,000 tiny distractions. But it mattered. God, it mattered more than you wanted to admit. You watched as others were showered with love, with congratulations, with standing ovations for milestones smaller than the wars you fought just to survive another day, and you stood there, clapping for everyone else while your own soul bled out in silence. You wrapped your arms around yourself in empty rooms. You whispered, "Happy birthday," to your reflection because no one else would. You lit candles on cakes you bought for yourself, blew them out alone, wishing not for something grand, just for someone to see you, really see you. Every time you achieved something big or small, you looked around for someone to share it with, someone to say, "I'm proud of you," someone to remind you that your victories weren't invisible. But all you found was empty air and hollow echoes, and you started to wonder if your life was happening at all, or if you were just dreaming it, some cruel, endless dream no one else was trapped in. The milestones you crossed, the battles you won, they disappeared into the void like they never happened. And the worst part, there was the silence that followed. The way the world moved on, laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating others, while you stood in the shadows, clapping for yourself with hands that were tired, with a heart that was breaking. They clapped for others, but never for you. You watched it happen 1,000 times, didn't you? Someone else took a single step forward, and the world roared with applause. You ran marathons on broken legs, and the world barely looked up. You watched as mediocrity was celebrated, while your excellence was ignored. You wondered if maybe you were cursed, if maybe there was something about you, something invisible but permanent, that made you unworthy of applause. You didn't want to be jealous, you didn't want to be bitter, you wanted to be happy for them, and sometimes you were. But deep down, there was a grief, a sharp and aching grief that no amount of goodwill could erase. You weren't asking for a standing ovation. You weren't begging for a parade. You just wanted someone to notice, someone to say, "You matter. I see you. I see how hard you're trying." But instead, you stood on the sidelines, watching others bask in the warmth you were never allowed to touch. You swallowed your pride, buried your hurt, and clapped along with everyone else. You smiled through the sting. You congratulated them, even as something inside you wilted a little more each time. And the applause that was never for you rang louder in your ears than any silence ever could. It became a mocking rhythm in your chest, a heartbeat of betrayal. And somewhere along the way, you stopped hoping for applause altogether. You stopped hoping for anything at all. You became a ghost with a heartbeat, alive, but not really living, breathing, but only because your body didn't know how to stop. You floated through your own life, weightless again. But this time it wasn't because they made you feel that way. It was because you had hollowed yourself out to survive. You laughed when it was expected. You nodded when you were supposed to. You played the part they assigned you, the background character, the silent witness, the filler in everyone else's story. Your own story gathered dust in the corners of your mind, unread, forgotten. You moved through conversations like smoke, through rooms like fog, present but never felt. People spoke to you but didn't really hear you. They looked at you but didn't really see you. You could have vanished, and the world would have blinked and kept moving. You wore your invisibility like a second skin, stitched to you so tightly you forgot there was ever a time you didn't wear it. You stopped raising your hand. You stopped speaking your mind. You stopped expecting anything from anyone. And still, somehow, The emptiness hurt. The loneliness wasn't just the absence of people. It was the absence of being. You could be surrounded by 100 bodies, 1,000 voices, and still feel like you were drifting alone in some vast, frozen ocean, unseen, unheard, unloved. And that kind of loneliness, that unbearable isolation, isn't something you cry about. It's something you carry, heavy and silent, tucked deep inside your bones, where no one else can touch it. Pain layered itself like armor you didn't ask for. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to be hard, to be closed off, to be guarded. No. The world taught you. It taught you that softness gets torn apart. It taught you that hope is a knife you turn against yourself. It taught you that love is a promise too easily broken. So you built your armor, piece by piece, layering pain on top of pain, disappointment on top of betrayal, until nothing could reach you anymore. You wore your numbness like a shield. You wrapped yourself in indifference like a cloak. You told yourself you didn't care. You laughed when you wanted to scream. You shrugged when you wanted to shatter. Because it was safer that way. Safer to pretend you didn't want anything. Safer to pretend you didn't need anyone. Safer to become a fortress no one could storm. But underneath all that steel and stone, the same heart still beat. Bruised, battered, but stubbornly alive. And every so often it would whisper through the cracks in your armor, whispering things you tried so hard not to hear. I miss being seen. I miss being loved. I miss being real. But you silenced it. You buried it. Because you knew that to feel again would mean to risk breaking all over again. And after everything, after all the loneliness, all the betrayal, all the nights spent drowning in battles no one ever saw, you weren't sure you could survive another break, somewhere deep inside you, deeper than the wounds, deeper than the loneliness, deeper even than the despair. Something growled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a roar. Not yet. It was quieter than a breath, softer than a memory. But it was there. A low, guttural hum in the darkest part of your chest. A sound that didn't belong to defeat, didn't belong to brokenness. A sound that didn't beg for love, didn't plead for mercy. It growled like a caged thing. Like a forgotten animal that had been beaten, starved, mocked, and yet refused to die. It stirred in your blood when you thought you had nothing left. It moved inside your muscles when your body was ready to surrender. It licked its wounds and bared its teeth, small but defiant, whispering into the void. Not yet. Not like this. You didn't notice it at first. You thought it was just another twitch of pain, another spasm of sadness. But the growl kept coming back, stronger every time you were stepped over, louder every time you swallowed your voice, fiercer every time you cried alone, and no one came. It lived in the spaces you thought were dead. It made a home in your hollow places, and though the world never saw it, though maybe even you didn't understand it, something inside you was gathering itself, waiting, sharpening its claws against the stone of your suffering. You didn't know it yet, but the part of you that could not be broken was waking up. Rage became a lifeline. Not the kind of rage they warned you about. Not the reckless fire that destroys everything in its path. No, this was different. This rage was clean, pure. It wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. It was cold and steady, a slow-burning star forged in the vacuum of your abandonment. It was born the day you realized no one was coming to save you. It grew every time you bit back your pride and clapped for others who wouldn't have noticed if you disappeared. It thickened in your veins every time the world looked through you, like you were nothing but mist. You realized slowly, painfully, that your sadness wouldn't save you. Your grief wouldn't make them care. Your silence wouldn't earn their respect. But your rage, your sacred, righteous rage, could be something different. It could be fuel. It could be a weapon. It could be the rope you threw yourself to crawl out of the pit they left you in. So you stopped apologizing for it. You stopped shrinking from it. You let it heat your bones. You let it steal your spine. You let it whisper promises in the dead of night. Get up. Keep going. Show them. Rage became the heartbeat you could trust, the fire you could stoke even when everything else was frozen. It didn't ask for permission. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It only asked one thing, that you rise. You started whispering no more. At first it was just a murmur, barely a thought, a phrase you mouthed to yourself in the mirror when you were too tired to stand tall. No more. You said it when you felt that old familiar sting, when they overlooked you again, when they dismissed you again, when they treated you like an afterthought, like an extra in the background of their shining stage. No more. You said it through gritted teeth when you forced yourself out of bed after another sleepless night. You said it under your breath when you held your own broken pieces together with trembling hands. Every time you whispered it, it grew louder. Every time you said it, you believed it a little more. No more forgetting who you are. No more begging to be seen. No more handing your worth to people too blind to see it. It wasn't a scream, not yet. You weren't ready to roar, but the whisper was enough. It was a spark flickering in the ruin, a stubborn flicker, refusing to be snuffed out by the ashes of your past. You clung to that whisper like a lifeline, repeating it until it stitched itself into your blood, until it rewrote the broken lullabies you used to sing yourself to sleep. No more, you vowed. And somewhere inside, the part of you that was made for more stirred, stretched, and smiled. The soil of your soul, hardened by years of cold seasons and heavy storms, began to crack. At first, it was just a hairline fracture, so small you could almost pretend it wasn't there. But the crack widened, it split deeper, and from that scarred, broken soil, something green pushed through, something tender, something stubborn, something impossibly alive. It wasn't majestic, it wasn't breathtaking, it wasn't a full-blown miracle yet. It was just a tiny shoot of resilience, shivering in the bitter wind but refusing to bow. You didn't even know how it survived, how after everything, there was still anything left inside you that could grow. But there it was, hope, raw, unshaped, undeniable. And once you saw it, once you dared to look at it, not with the eyes of someone broken, but with the eyes of someone becoming, you couldn't unsee it. You realized that even in the wasteland they left you in, you had roots, deep ones, roots that drank in every drop of sorrow and turned it into stubborn, defiant life. You weren't dead soil. You weren't a graveyard. You were a field lying fallow, waiting for the right season to bloom. And that season, that impossible, unpromised, miraculous season, was beginning. Quietly, fiercely, in the cracks of your hurt, in the wreckage of your doubts, in the spaces you thought would never hold anything beautiful again. Something green was pushing through. When no one is watching, you work. You don't wait for an audience anymore. You don't wait for permission, for validation, for applause. You know better now. You understand that the most important battles are fought in silence, in empty rooms, behind locked doors, where no one but your own shadow bears witness. You rise before the sun, and you move when the world is still asleep, because you aren't chasing their approval anymore. You're chasing something deeper, something purer. You are chasing the version of yourself that refuses to be ignored. You put in the hours no one counts. You bleed in ways no one can see. You sacrifice in ways no one will ever understand. And you do it not for show, not for praise, but because you made yourself a promise that you will become something too heavy to be overlooked ever again. Every repetition, every page, every lonely hour spent grinding away at your craft, your body, your mind. You stack it in silence like stone upon stone, a fortress rising in the dark. And when doubt creeps in, when exhaustion claws at your spine, you remind yourself, they don't have to see it. Not yet. But someday they will. And by then it will be too late for them to catch up.